Good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us. I'm Dale Stewart, the Assistant Superintendent for Student Services, and I want to welcome you to our first Parent University of the 2021-2022 school year. Tonight, we're going to talk about something that we hope will definitely change the lives of our students. We are going to talk about our new Student Expectation Code, the SCC. When I said changing gears, we are really working to build the behavior that we want to see in our students. So I'm a mental health professional and educator kind of combo. So I often say that we teach students how to read, we teach students how to do math, we teach students how to swim, we even teach students how to drive, but we punish them when they fail, when they misbehave, rather than teach them the appropriate behavior. So this new student expectation code is focused on really teaching students how to behave and actually implementing restorative practices, which means I'm going to restore, repair, or heal the relationship that I broke from my misbehavior. So on behalf of Dr. Davis, our superintendent, and our Board of Education, I am so pleased to welcome each of you here to, this evening. With us, we have Dr. Michaela Thomas and Mr. Stoney Withers, our two homeschool liaisons. And of course, this event is hosted out of our Family and Community Engagement Office with Mr. Albert Harrold. I can't talk here. So, but thank you so much for joining us for this very important conversation, because what we do know is that we need you as partners in our building the social and emotional learning skills in our students. So we want, we're communicating it to students, we want you to communicate it to students, and we want students to learn how to control their emotions and their behavior. So thanks so much, Dr. Thomas and Mr. Withers for joining us and for sharing this information. Thanks so much, Mr. Harrell, for hosting this event. And I look forward to a very interesting conversation and dialogue. And I see one of our board members actually logging on, Mr. Terry Tyson. We'll let him log on and we'll at least let him bring us greetings. I see him logging on. I see he's still on mute and his camera's not on yet, but I am more than certain he would want to share some words with you tonight.
Who, me?
Yes, sir. We are honored to have you.
I just came on listen. I passed. You know, it's a dangerous thing to give a preacher a microphone now, so let's go ahead. Let me be. Now I'm a listener, like, bro. Okay. Thank you, though, for that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tyson, for joining us. So we're very honored to have one of our board members, Mr. Terry Tyson, actually joining us tonight. Dr. Thomas, Mr. Withers, I look forward to hearing from you.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Thomas. A little bit about me. I'm born and raised in the city of St. Louis. I am a very, very proud Normandy Viking. I've been a counselor for 15 years. I moved away for about 7 years. I lived and worked in DC, and I recently transitioned back to the city. I'm very excited to be here. And as Dr. Stewart said, I'm one of the homeschool liaisons, and our main goal or our main focus, if I had to summarize it, is to work in concert with district administrators and parents to eradicate barriers for students in an effort to increase student achievement. And one of the ways that we're going to do that is to work diligently to implement the new SEC. And so with that being said, I'll turn it over to my counterpart, Mr. Withers.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your evening just to join us. As it's been stated, my name is Stoney Withers. I'm also a homeschool liaison for the district. A little bit about me. I'm originally from Little Rock, Arkansas. So if you hear that Southern twang throughout the night, that's what it is. I moved here about 7 years ago to pursue my master's degree in counseling. So I am a therapist by trade. In the past 7 years, I've worked at Logo School, which is a school for mental health behaviors, but now I have transitioned over, and I'm so glad to be a part of the Ferguson-Forreston School District. Dr. Thomas put it perfectly, our purpose for this evening, so I won't go more into that, but well, we can guess go ahead and get started with our presentation for this evening. All right, so as I stated, I'm Mr. Withers. Dr. Thomas, we're working hand in hand with the district to alleviate some of those barriers that students face and just to get them on the path of success and to be able to have a great year and further years in the future. So, first one. So this is a little excerpt from our student expectations code for the 21-22 school year. So the purpose of the SEC is to promote fairness and equity through clear, appropriate, and consistent expectations and consequences in addressing students' inappropriate choices, and to ensure that students learn from their mistakes and repair harm when their behavior impacts others. Okay. So as most schools that, and a lot of us probably experienced this growing up, going through just punitive types of practices when behaviors and things pop up. So actually focusing in on the behavior and kind of taking out the human piece of it, the fact that we're dealing with an individual. So we're really trying to move to those practices which are more restorative. So just a little bit of background of what the traditional school setting, go back into that one. Okay, so with punitive practices, that type of discipline, it doesn't really focus on helping either the person who caused the harm or the person who was harmed. It, like I said, it just really focuses on the behavior. Punitive discipline doesn't let the educators educate. They also undermine what social and emotional learning. So there are the opportunities to learn from mistakes. We all know that. When it's a more punitive practice, we're not giving those students those opportunities to learn those social skills and to grow emotionally. Punitive discipline makes schools feel like a prison, not a community, and it violates our ideals as educators. Okay. So found this example of restorative practices that I thought would fit well to kind of give kind of an overview of really what we mean when we say restorative practices. So I'm going to go through this. A tale of two schools. So Carlos had a heated argument with his parents before leaving for school. So he's running late. Let's see the difference that restorative policies and practices can make. So as we know, if we got a lot going on, sometimes that can trickle over into work, that can trickle over to how we respond to certain people. You know, those are things we got to be conscious about and watch. So it's no different for our students. If they're experiencing something at the home front, it can probably trickle into the school day. So a zero tolerance education system or those more punitive practices, with that school, he is greeted by metal detectors and a police search. So imagine starting your day off by walking in and the first thing that you see are metal detectors. And there's a police there searching you. You know, those are kind of some of those more punitive practices. Now, when we look at a restorative practice-based education system, teachers and administrators, they're welcoming him in and his fellow students as they enter. Very welcoming environment. Okay? So that's when he arrives at school. So Carlos is late to his first period class. As I talked about, that kind of trickle down effect. Maybe he's dealing with what happened earlier in the day and processing that. So he's late for a class period. On the punitive side, his teacher scolds him in front of the class. Carlos talks back and is given detention. On the restorative side, his teachers wait until after class to speak with Carlos to learn more and sets up a meeting with the school counselor. So as you see, he's not being scolded on that restorative side. He's actually getting set down and individually, not picked apart in front of his classmates, and giving that chance to kind of talk it out and talk about what he's feeling or what's going on with him, so that the teacher can get more insight. Now, the next piece is Carlos goes into gets into a minor altercation in the cafeteria. So a school police officer detains and arrests both students. Barely any talking done there. But then we move to the restorative side of things, and the student and peer mediators and support staff intervene, have the students sit down together and de-escalate the situation. So really some of those problem solving skills and being able to just put those social skills into play, being able to talk out situations, a lesson that they're going to need to learn for the future. So the next piece of it is later that afternoon, Carlos is held in a juvenile detention facility all afternoon, missed in school. He now has an arrest record and is facing suspension. That's the more punitive side of things. But if we look over to the restorative side, Carlos and other students agree to help clean the cafeteria during a free period. Carlos meets with his counselor and parents after school to help resolve the conflict at home. So not only are they, on this side of things, are they restoring and repairing, and I say repairing because they may have torn up the cafeteria during that time. So they're coming together to actually clean up the cafeteria. They're kind of repairing that damage that they may have caused there. And then also on the other side of things, Carlos is meeting with his counselor and his parents. So he's getting that time that he may need to be able to express the things that he's going through, and things that he's experiencing from his perspective. So our solutions, restorative practices. In the past, we only had 3 levels of behaviors and interventions that we put in place to combat those behaviors. But in an attempt to really put these restorative practices in place, we've expanded to a 5-level where it's talking about behaviors from different levels and being able to put in the interventions that we put in place as a district. So as you can see, with the first level, behaviors disrupt the school environment or self and others. And the restorative practices that we put in place are effective language and effective statements, impromptu conversations, community building, circles, problem-solving circles, student-facilitated problem-solving circles. So as you see, a lot of problem-solving going on. So it's not we shaking the finger, it's we're coming together to see how we can solve the problem. For that level 2, you got some repeated or significant level 1 infractions. So some of those repeated behaviors that may have been seen in level 1 that disrupt the school environment or self or others. And with that, we do restorative chat using restorative questions. Restorative questions are really those questions that say, what is it from your perspective? How did this get started? Things like that, actually having that conversation with that student and making them feel like that they're heard and not just, like I said, getting the finger shook at them. Level 3 is repeated or significant level 2 infractions. So behaviors targeted at others or interfere with safety equipment. So during those type of infractions, restorative conversations and they go back to class plan. So they're actually planning and coming together and seeing how we can restore and repair whatever type of harm that may have been caused as a result of that infraction or behavior. So there can also be staff-led mediations and restitution for property incidents. Level 4 or repeated or significant level 3 infractions, behavior that mess with safety. Restorative practices that we take there are restorative conference and restorative action plan. So actually putting a plan in place, restitution for property incidents, reentry, a restorative circle. So when you're returning from suspension, say that there's something that happens and a student must be out of the building, which is what we're really trying to get away from with this entire practice, is just being able to lessen the time that students are out of their seat, getting that one-on-one instruction that they really need to be successful. So if that were to happen and they were to have to be out of the building, actually having a return meeting just to be able to say, okay, now how we can, come together and keep this from happening, keep you in school and help you be successful. And level 5 is that top level where behavior is identified as expellable offenses. So restorative practices are a formal family and group restorative conference. It may be a part of this move to a new setting. Reentry restorative circles, so the same kind of planning when returning from a suspension, and restitution for harm caused. So we have 3 levels of interventions that we're kind of putting in place district-wide that's going to address those different levels. We're going to have different interventions and ways to be able to say that we've tried this, we've gone this route to assist the student and support the student. Supports and restorative practices per infraction level. So just again, to reiterate what restorative practices really are about, they address and discuss the needs of the student, the community. Can you go back one? They build healthy relationships between educators and students. And really, I find this to be the most important piece of it. And one of the most important pieces, just because if that relationship is not there, a lot of this other stuff can't happen. So reduce and prevent and improve harmful behavior, repair harm and restore positive relationships, resolve conflicts, hold individuals and groups accountable. So their relationship is a really important piece of that, because when you get that trust and those students get that trust and build that trust up for you in those relationships, it helps out. So level 1 behaviors, and I'm just going to kind of briefly go over each level for you. If you end up having any questions, you can put it in the chat. We do have some time set aside at the end of this slideshow to answer any questions that you may have. So level 1 behaviors, they disrupt, cause a disruption to the immediate space or a few of the other areas. They don't follow behavior which does not follow reasonable requests, behavior that is generally managed with a brief intervention by an adult present in that building. So some examples, just name calling, tardiness, inappropriate dress, things of that nature. So a couple of interventions and responses are just to select and implement interventions and responses that maintain the continuity of the student's instruction or are least disruptive. So the main piece is being able to have students stay in the building and get that one-on-one instruction. So we have school-based supports, restorative practices, and school staff supports. So I'm just going to name one of each, and all this will be available to you to be able to look over. So reminders and redirections are some skills-based supports. Restorative practices are those problem-solving circles that we talked about, that student-facilitated problem-solving circles. The school staff supports are the review behavior management plan, including social skills teaching and reinforcement, classroom-based responses, maybe some role play and things of that nature. The next piece is level 2. Level 2 behaviors, interventions, and responses. So these are the ones that are disruptive and they interfere, actually start to kind of interfere with the classroom and other students in the classroom and kind of impede their learning. So it could be using a cell phone during class, significant disruptions, minor property damage. And the same thing there, we have skills-based supports, restorative practices, and school supports. So reteaching classroom routines and rituals. You know, I know all of us sometimes maybe had when we were growing up and going through school, had to have kind of reminders of what the rules are. Nothing different here. Restorative practices, peacekeeping circles for problem solving. So a lot of gathering, you know, a lot of gathering and talking things through and figuring out really what's at the root of the problem so that we can start to heal and be able to fix those things and lessen the occurrences of those type of behaviors or infractions. So schools, staff supports, they develop a student skill plan, initiate behavior intervention plans. So yeah, and a referral to a school counselor. That collaboration with those school counselors are important as well in these practices. So those level 3 behaviors, they're targeted at or targeting others. So threats, intimidation, fighting, bumping into an adult during a student conflict, major classroom disruptions, possessions of drugs or controlled substance. With those behaviors, they have counselor-led small groups and skill instruction, lessons in anger management, conflict resolution, bus safety. Also some good social pieces. There are things that they're going to need for the future. Being able to get control of those angry impulses and getting down to the bottom of those emotions. So restorative practice, staff-led mediations, restitution for property incidents. School staff supports is a loss of classroom setting privileges, student staff conference, change in the classroom assignment. So those are things that we consider at those levels, at level 3. Okay, so and for level 4, that definitions of repeated or significant incidents of level 3 infractions. So, you know, multiple incidents of fighting or possessions of drugs or threats and intimidation. Fights involving multiple students using hate speech. So some of those supports look like individual coaching by licensed support staff. Restorative practices include restitution for property incidents, reentry restorative circle. So like I said earlier, when you're returning from suspension, being able to sit down and talk about how we can be successful and lessen the occurrences of those things happening. School staff supports our district assigned mentor, creating a behavior intervention plan for the student, formal meetings with the parent or guardian and caregiver. So as you can see underneath there, those options, it kind of breaks it down from pre-K, second grade, third to fifth grade, sixth to eighth, and then the high school levels, and kind of gives you some of those possible results when they do get to these level 3 and 4 infractions. Okay, so level 5 are behaviors identified as expellable offenses. So that's weapons, weapon possessions or use, severe physical contact, sexual assault, arson, bomb threats, those things, and the types of supports that are provided at that level are individual coaching by licensed support staff. Restorative practices include a formal family and group restorative conference, maybe as a part of moving to a new setting, restitution for any harm caused, school support staff, so referral to district partner, counseling, social work agency, or reassignment to the wellness center. And the same with that is broken down into grade level. And we just wanted to add a page with links here for you to be able to access the student expectation code. We also have a resource that kind of goes a little bit deeper into the partnership between families and school for those restorative practices. So you can get a little bit more information about restorative practices there. And then we also have our parent resource guide that is also available on our district website. So now is the time that we will take any questions that anyone may have. Dr. Thomas, I'm actually not able to pull up see the chat. Were there any questions in the chat while we were giving the presentation?
Hey, Mr. Withers, this is Mr. Harrold. There was one question in the chat by Mr. Tyson that asked, is this the first year that we're outlining the restorative practices? Dr. Dale Stewart answered it, and he basically said that this is the second year where we're implementing these practices. Last year, it was basically implemented virtually.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart.
Well, that's the end of the presentation that we prepared for you this evening. Dr. Thomas, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
What I would like to add is that the resource that we linked in describing the parent partnership as it relates to restorative practices is an excellent resource for parents to understand how restorative practices work and how they can continue their work in the home. So I think if parents look at any resource that we link, that would be an excellent one.